Let's talk a little bit about the Romantic era, time when the metronome actually was demonstrated for the first time, and how did people react to this?
Well, that's what we perhaps today do not realize anymore. We started by saying, like many people today hate just the metronome because of, you know, reminiscences to our piano lessons. But back in the days, the top composers were euphoric. They embraced this machine with everything they had. Of course, on top of the list is Beethoven. Beethoven had the plan of metronomizing his entire work. He didn't do that, but he gave a lot of metronome numbers, string quartets, symphonies. They were all published in 1817. Of course, Melzel was a brilliant marketeer. He used modern marketing technology because he went for important people, influencers, we would call them today, to get testimonials, we would say today. So he went to Kramer, Salieri, Beethoven, Spohr, you name it. So, but people were, I wouldn't say desperately, they were looking for a machine that would give or would end the confusion for performances of their works. Because we've shared it, or we said it before, we live in a time where the professional musician is not longer a composer and a performer. So Beethoven is one of the first who composed in a way you could say he presented the world with a finished score. He was one of the first who said, I actually don't want you to add anything in my score. When Czerny, very young still, with his father came and he played the Waldstein Sonata from paper, and he played other sonatas by memory. Beethoven said, the guy is really, really good, but playing from memory, yeah, but make sure that he doesn't skip any of my remarks. He wanted to have everything there. Mozart was a different time. You improvised a little bit in his works if you played it. In Beethoven's time, there you had a finished score, which was going to be performed by other musicians. So that's part of the reason that composers were embracing this metronome. They would make a statue for it at that time. So let's make no mistake about it. The metronome was a huge thing. It's exploded.
So finally, Winkel or Melzel?
So Melzel was a machine inventor. So he invented a lot of crazy stuff. Part of the problems with Beethoven was the composition he made for his orchestrion, like his automaton, as the people say in the days, were famous things. Not only him, he was part of, I mean, people made amazing stuff. But he made the chronometer before, which had problems. And I don't know much about the chronometer, but it was presented already to Beethoven in 1812, 1813. And then Melzel presented this idea in Amsterdam, I think, on the exhibition, and there he met Winkel. And Winkel had solved the problem, I think, or the clock. It's technical, but Melzel saw the machine and he basically copied it, and went
patent,
patent, yeah. So he won, Melzel, let's say.
Okay, fine. So. Would you link the tempo increase to beginning of, I would say, professional conservatories era, So you think as soon as people were gathered in the same place and basically aiming the same goals to become a professional musician, then we can notice that the tempo and speed basically started to increase, right?
Of course, we speak in general.
Yeah.
There were a lot of differences in terms of quality in that time.
Yeah.
But in general, you could say that the musicians who were considered to be the top of the top of the top, I think when we could go back to a performance of 1840, that would already be surprisingly fast in many instances. So it was an evolution that went like boom, suddenly.
However, you insist that Chopin, which we all think that it was a brilliant pianist and writing exclusively, brilliant compositions, you think that he played much slower than we do today?
Well, yeah, sure, that there is no doubt about this. I mean, Chopin was not, the Chopin we have created in our minds was not the Chopin who actually lived. He was not one of the most, I mean, he was not considered to be a virtuoso pianist in his days compared to the Liszts and to the what had you Hansel and all these guys and Thalberg. The other days I was reading in Clara Schumann's diary, 1835. He visited the Schumanns in Leipzig, I think, where they were at the time. And Clara describes he played a nocturne, barely noticeable that he touched the piano, the sound, I mean. And he said, it's heartbreaking, but he had to use his power of his entire body to play one forte chord because he was so sick and so weak. And that's the Chopin of which people like Trifonov say, probably his fourth finger was longer than usual. That's the reason why he could play all this stuff. No, he couldn't. When Liszt played his etudes, Chopin wrote, I wished I could play it like this guy, sight reading my stuff. It was literal. Liszt was outperforming Chopin by a lot. I mean, yet, if you asked Heine, the German poet, who was a friend of Chopin, who's the best pianist, Liszt or Thalberg, he would say Chopin, because he had a certain sensibility in his playing. He could play incredibly soft. He could play these ornaments in a way very few people could, like very natural.
And what Moshe also was describing, that his passages were incredibly colorful and even sounding also.
He must have been an amazing pianist. But to say that he was a virtuoso compared to Liszt, I mean, just take etudes by Kalkbrenner, Hertz, Liszt, Thalberg, and compare them to Chopin etudes. Then suddenly Chopin etudes feel like very medium level music. We have made something out of that music in the time hadn't, because we have sped up this music incredibly so much that it becomes almost unplayable. So
what I really would love to see, it's not a request, it's just my own desire. I really would love to hear maybe one day you making a review of Chopin Etude Number 2, Opus 25, because what I hear and what I see today in discussion about this etude, it's so far from actually what's written in the scores, starting from the speed and ending up with matching those quarter triplets versus 8 notes triplets in presto tempo, and basically today, if you chase a speed, you play just 8 notes versus quarters. That's it. Para 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 para. It doesn't have any more the sense of tara pa para ta tara pa pa ta ta of triplets. And I think actually this is a great example, and maybe one day if you will decide to make just a video about, let's say, five the most ridiculous, misconnecting the scores and just making kind of review of what's going on today, and what's actually written in scores. And it's a very interesting question, why do we ignore this? And I heard so many masterclasses about Chopin etudes, and I would say that 85 to 90% of masterclasses which I was attending, and when professors were talking about this etude, either they were not very clear about it, or they were saying, you know what, just play on cue, just by 8 notes, tara 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 tara, because he said, because everyone is doing this today. So this is interesting, right?
When you take something out of its context so much, let's imagine for a moment that what we think about the metronome music is right, that Chopin's music was played differently. So when you take something out of context so much, it's no surprise that you will have to face and solve a lot of problems That's just one.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the Opus 10 number 2, the A minor with the chromatic lines. I mean, have you ever seen the manuscript of this?
I think so. Yeah.
That he still made in Warsaw when he was 19. He doesn't give 16th notes in the second and first finger. He gives quarter notes. So you have to hold the quarter notes. I mean, you have to solve a lot of problems that when you restore this, what we think is the historical use of the metronome, fall into place. I mean, Chopin, don't quote me wrong, it will be not for every pianist. He was far above the average level. He was not Mr. Nobody. I was just saying he is not the Franz Liszt and the Thalberg of his time. He couldn't do that physically. So his music represents that. But I mean, the octave etude and other etudes will, even in whole beat, will not be for everyone. That's what people sometimes think, that when you play this theory, everything becomes so laughably easy. It's not. Let's go to the Hammerklavier sonata for a moment. That's not something you can sight read in that tempo. But yeah, problems you will have to solve on a lot of fields. Fingering. No one is talking about historical fingerings. Pedaling. Who is ever talking about Chopin's pedaling? Yeah, on paper, but who is doing it? The reason for that is also Beethoven. Beethoven, of course, in his first period, that's different, but his later period is so clearly indicated. He indicates pedal where he wants it. But if you go to speed up music that much, you live by the grace of the pedal, because you haven't got time to just make it individual tone quality. The pedal is, you go out of the key and the pedal serves for a certain sound. So yeah, Chopin is it's, I don't know, it's his music, he was a legend in his time, of course. His music was so well in Vienna at the time in the 30s. No one cared about Mendelssohn and all that, just Chopin. So it's one of the composers we will dive into next year a lot. We hope to restore a little pianino, which is a Pleyel upright piano of 1838, which he loved playing. He preferred the upright little piano before the grand. And then we're going to start to doing all his works in whole beat. Yeah.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Remember, we had one conversation before off camera, just a short meeting, and I asked you why you think that metronome was used only in a single way. So, like, only, let's say, when you count subdivision of notes, not a single beat. So they're basically whole. Why I'm asking this? Because first of all, I think that if a man, a person, if he's not spoiled by the inventions in general, no microwaves, no stoves, no fridge, nothing, no cell phones, and then he received this kind of toy, in his hands, then why would he stick to one particular method of using this exclusively? Why it was not used in many different ways, for example, for whole beat and for single beat as well? And another question, since we started to talk about Chopin, don't you think that this time, because he was born in 1810, and then during his life, he was not living long life. But however, if that was the exact moment when speed started to increase dramatically, don't you think that because he was also motivated to sell his compositions and basically promote himself, don't you think that he was following this path somehow? And let's say from the early opuses, maybe you can find many evidence of playing his music in a whole beat. However, his, let's say, last composition, last years, don't you think that sounds, at least sounds more convincing, better in single beat interpretations?
Yeah, well, Chopin abandoned the metronome at a certain moment in his life, I think even in the 30s. So for his later works, we don't have metronomizations anymore. As for instance, for Liszt, we have almost nothing. Brahms, we have almost nothing. So that's an interesting question. think there is a certain truth in that, but that we can never really reconstruct because we weren't there. To say that he made an evolution, or composers made an evolution to a certain tempo understanding that goes beyond any understanding of notation, that's something I cannot believe. And you don't see that reflected in the pieces we have metronome numbers from. Also, if we see metronomizations by Mertke, a German guy, or Kulak, Czerny student of works of Chopin, which are unbelievably similar. That's one of the remarkable things as well, that you see metronome numbers throughout whole Europe made for similar works. Independently from each other, they are very close to each other. That, yeah, if you apply their single beat, that would be unplayable or just make no sense. And if you apply the whole beat there, then you get another picture. To answer your first question, I wish it were so black and white, but it wasn't. The single beat use, or the modern use of the metronome, was always a thing. It's not that there was only whole beat. The 19th century, however, if you would say very generally, from a bird's angle perspective again, let's say 85% of the music is with metronome numbers was in whole beat. That's actually what you see. There was a portion of music that doubtlessly must have been in single beat very early on. For instance, Vincent Novello, the famous publisher, still exists, I think. He went in the 1820s to Salzburg to meet the sister of Mozart just 6 months before she died, and to Constance in Vienna to talk about Mozart's music. And he published as a first one in England in his new edition, the Mozart and Haydn masses, just to make sure that they didn't disappear because they weren't printed then. His metronome numbers, if you compare those to the metronomization, for instance, that Hummel, a Mozart student, gave to orchestral baroques and chamber music, they are about in a ratio of 1 to 2. And now people will say, yeah, but chamber music was known to be faster than church music. Okay, we were still talking about the same notation system, notation that didn't change that much. And I can acknowledge, I mean, I can accept that church music was a little slower, but not like this, and exactly like this. So this went on. The church music, Deutsches Requiem of Brahms, I cannot say for 100%, but my feeling is that might be just single beat as well. If you see the notation, very long notes, applying the whole beat system there would say, okay, that would become totally out of scope of everything. So you had this double system, Griepenkerl, organ works of Bach, I think it's single beat. Hanon, you know that, the pianist virtuoso, compare those metronome marks with Czerny, exactly 1 to 2. Czerny is double the speed of Hanon. You must have known that. I wish I could find the letters of Hanon, which was a mysterious guy. He didn't publish in Paris. He had his own publishing company in somewhere in France. But why did he give 108 quarter note where Czerny gave 108 half note? So, and then you come in the early 20th century, where some strange things happened, which we cannot explain. I mean, I'm working together with Lorenz Gadi, and you might not know this book, but that's the person who is actually doing all the research. We're writing together a new book. He is writing all the theoretical parts, but then you have some stories, and then, like for instance, Max Reger, he wrote a lot of piano music, but he's primarily known for his organ works. So very complex music, which was always premiered, not by him, but by Carl Strauberg, the organist in Leipzig. They worked together. Reger's metronome numbers are double those of Strauberg, who published instruction editions at the same time, and not exactly double, about double. So Strauberg gave his own metronome numbers for Reger's works, and they match about. That's an interesting part. He just didn't halve them. He gave his own metronome numbers 1 to 2. Never one word of discussion between the two, always words of approval by Reger. And then after 1917, Reger started republishing older works, and he also halved his metronome numbers suddenly without explanation. And then you come in the 20s and the 30s where publishing houses were editing and just publishing Reger's works, and they reached out to organists studying with Carl Strauberg still to ask explanation about the metronome marks. So there must have been a period in which there was absolutely no interest in metronomization whatsoever or metronome marks, and they somehow didn't understand the system anymore. Of course, we went through 2 world wars in Europe. I mean, a lot's changed. But if you ask me, can you today, we're recording it the 22nd of May, 2020, give a clear reconstruction of how people perceive the metronome, how they used it, when? I cannot. The only thing I can say, if you do not accept the existence of whole beats as an historical used metronome use, then you have to reject the majority of 19th century tempo indications.
You see, if you're saying that approximately 80 to 85% of music was written in a whole beat system, and some portion of music was written in a single beat, then today the society, musical, of course, society completely rejects the existence of whole beats. What surprised me the most, actually, after I will be asking you how you're dealing with those people, but here's some of my experiences. Very often we just go for concerts. Sometimes it's Baroque societies, or like people playing on period instruments. They are not reconstructing the tempo. They're playing as fast. So basically, they're doing exactly the same things what's happening on the main stage of classical music, but on the period instruments. That's what they do. My question: do you communicate with them anyhow?
Yeah, that's a topic on its own, of course. My understanding of early music is today that the movement, as we know it, and that's, I mean, it's a bold statement, I know, but I'm making it anyway. It has come to an end. Because if you want to, I mean, the early music movement started basically not in the 60s, if we think that, but of course they were staged so much, and there were recording companies that promoted these guys so much in the 60s and 70s, and basically that was the boom period of the early music movement. You couldn't think of anything too crazy to bring it on stage, and people would say, yes, we're going to experiment with music. And so, surprisingly or not, what happened is that there came a moment at a certain point where these people who were still considered today as pioneers, they were invited to become teachers in conservatories, have orchestras connected to concert halls, and suddenly you had a second generation, third generation. I'm actually third generation early music adept, I would say. My teacher, Jacques van Oortmesse, was one of the pioneers as well, maybe second generation already. So, but we all play in our teacher's system. And I remember Jacques van Oortmesse, my organ teacher, was a brilliant man. He passed away too soon. He said to me, the great danger of the early music movement is that we are teaching these people, young musicians, with our knowledge, and they will not go beyond our knowledge anymore. You have to go back and question our generation. But today, if you play the Hammerklavier Sonata for the first time ever in history, and I didn't do that, Alberto did that, you're going to interview him as well, I think, in a system where you can say, okay, I don't agree with your theory, but the metronome is actually ticking with our playing, so it is a solution. And then you see people say, reject that so fiercely, even as an experiment. Then I say, okay, but then the early music movement has stopped to exist, because that's the nature of it. We need to question ourselves. We need to find a solution. And what is the other solution? So we can debate about the solution, but we shouldn't be debating about play that music differently. We should embrace that. And I have to say, I think personally that I've always wondered, and this is something that happened when I was still studying in Amsterdam. I wrote articles on tempo. I mean, there was an internet. We live by the grace of YouTube today. It is our platform. We create this island, and everybody who wants to come on board, welcome. Really, we are having more and more musicians that come on board. And at the end, I should take a long break and everything should move forward anyways. It's not about me.
Mhm.
But I saw from the 90s, like even talking about tempo, those articles weren't published. And I grant those people that maybe my articles back then were not scientific enough. But there was not a rejection based upon the quality of my articles but because of the idea. And still today, it's for so many people who have a position so hard to say, you know what, I come on board with you and we're just going to play. We have next Monday, so we have the premiere of the trio Opus 38 of Beethoven with one of the most famous clarinet players in Europe who says, I don't care, I'm just coming on board because I want to experiment with this way, which gives me a lot more freedom. He's still playing Beethoven in his way, of course, in the way that's the duality we live in today. But at the minimum, we should come to a scene, to an acceptance of this as an experiment at the minimum, and then we can go and just play music and no longer have to defend our option. That would be cool. That would be, I wouldn't say a victory because we don't think strategically like that, but that is actually where we go for, that we create this island and people say, those are the whole beaters. We know that great guys, great musicians, we love their music, but we have also the old early music and we have the Steinway people. That would be cool.
I think it's very important to clarify that you're not arguing that the tradition of the modern piano playing. I remember during our first conversation, you said that you see two pianos in my studio and you're surprised that I'm so open to try, but I don't see reasons why. Why don't we try? I mean, I'm striving to, I'm dying to ask my students to play slower because I want them to shape music in the right way. So for me, as for teacher, even if this theory will be not proven like 100%, it's still very correct thing to do. So you're right, if it's experiment, but I think that on your channel, people really don't see that you talking about the experiments. I think that they might feel that you actually criticizing them for playing music by Beethoven or Mozart incorrectly. This is probably what's.
But that's also inevitable, because you're totally cool with the idea that there might have been historically another way of playing Beethoven. But what it really means, that if we are right, and again, what's the other solution? I would be very happy to see the metronome number you can divide by 2 in a subdivision, or just have it in a modern reading. What you actually are doing, or what I'm doing, even if I would only play the Waldstein sonata in the way I think it is without explanation, would be exactly the same. I would say to people, listen, you can do whatever you want and continue playing like you want to play. But from this moment onwards, you know that the way you are playing Beethoven is the way people played Beethoven in 1817. It's not 70. It's not the way he had his works in mind. And that's the reason why people sometimes are freaking out, because we have the idea that we honor the composer. But if you really think about it, when was the last time you were really serious about anything in the score? And from the first moment you would say, this is something I cannot solve, totally rethink. We're not living in that system. I know a lot of musicians, and that's maybe off topic a little bit, but it's important because it's related to that as well. I know musicians who would die to come on board, but they're not allowed. Young musicians who still have to go to a conservatory. Can you imagine someone going to?
In this system, it's not possible. It's actually clear. You know what? I always been studying at different music schools, conservatories, and I know how the system actually already limit you from all the way. They force to play the same etudes over and over again. And of course, they expect to hear them in tempi, which is traditional for our contemporary era. I mean,
it's the only thing that people are in conservatory still concerned about. I mean, I've been there too.
Yeah.
I remember my teacher Jacques van Noordmes, he had a huge influence on me, and you could say I may be doing his work further. He said always he wanted to be questioned, and if he didn't know an answer, he said, I don't know. I don't know. So, but imagine Alberto would do his entrance examination, playing the Hammerklavier Sonate Fugue in half beat, so in whole beat, I would say. And people would be astonished and start to yell at him, of course, because the Hammerklavier Sonate, how dare you, at the beginning. And he would say, okay, sit at the piano and do it in your way. I mean, that would be the end of a discussion. Yeah. Why? Because all those teachers, and the majority is, I mean, I cannot blame them for that, but it's a system we should actually also wanted to discuss, that those teachers wouldn't have an answer to him because they couldn't play that. Who can play the Hammerklavier Sonate and single beat? No one, although people claim that they can, but they cannot. And secondly, if he gives a solution, he would be rejected for the solution. And that's something I can understand right now, but it's also a pain point in our system. Because what are we actually teaching people? Are we teaching players to play as fast as possible, which is a way of doing? You could say, okay, you come in a conservatory and we want you to play as fast as possible so that later you can play everything you want in your way. That I could understand. But now there is this aura around that there's also the tradition that we want to have that goes back to Beethoven. And that's, of course, what people are freaking out, as we said before. If I come with this statement like, hey guys, but this has to be like that, then I'm hitting the system like from this angle. And I can do my best to smile, to bring my dog Sibo in the videos like Alberto is doing actually, and to be as positive and joyful as the message will remain the same. If this is true, then the whole system collapses. And I think only for a short moment, because what you will see then, imagine that someone with a lot of influence tomorrow would give an interview and say, hey, this WIM Winters there in Belgium, what he says, I don't think it's nonsense. Okay, let's assume this whole beat concept is accepted then, after that, imaginary world. The conservatory system would go on like it does today. Only we would know that there is another world that we might not learn in the conservatory, which is going back in time. So being relaxed about all of this is what I would love to do, and what we certainly try to on the channel also. We are serious about what we do. If I say historical tempo reconstruction, it's nothing more than that. It's a reconstruction of an historical tempo. I'm not saying it's the only one, but I claim that, and people are freaking out even for that claim. But I'm not giving an inch there because that's exactly what I believe in. That's what I do.
Yeah, and you definitely have right, you know, to claim things which you're sure about. I mean, because I feel actually the reason of this interview is to first of all to spread this information as far as we can, and keep this conversation, this dialogue going. From my understanding, for example, for Dr. Levin, whom I admire a lot for what he's doing in Mozart researches, for instance, why don't we just ask him directly? Why don't we contact him and make this kind of, you know, conversation and ask him questions? Because even for me, his playing is fast. I'm playing slower on piano than he's playing sonatas on harpsichord, and this is a very interesting topic. It's matter for discussion, to my opinion. And another reason why I decided to make this interview, and you know, I meet many pianists and many teachers, and that's exactly what you just said, that most of them, I would say, it's actually, I'm scared to pronounce this number, but almost 85–90% of them just relying to the information they receive from the teachers, instead of opening a book or opening a manuscript and do research their own. You know, at the same time, they're so sure, and they're so you know, firm about their traditional way of performance. So basically, I just would like to remind all young musicians: you have many choices. It's not necessary you must stick to what your teacher said. Yes, you have to be always polite, and actually, even in case with Alberto, I think he has a wonderful opportunity to learn music by Ravel, by Rachmaninoff, by Debussy, by new school, I would say, when the tempo is not the question.
But there is no place for someone like Alberto. If he comes here, he kind of drinks everything I say to him, and I don't see myself as a great teacher, but he says I am, because he says there's nowhere in the world I can learn the things like you play. Partly because I was trained as an organist, and from that, I may take a lot of different stuff for pianists. I can see that, and I've played this way like a long period of my life. So this generation has to fall in line with the conservatory system in order to get their paper that they can teach later. And so that's a fundamental problem, because he doesn't want that. Perhaps he wants to play modern music, I don't know, but he wants to play like this. And there is no way. You're not allowed to do that. So that is a fundamental problem. On an academical level, I would say that's even a more fundamental problem, because do we have a problem or not? Even pointing to the fact in an open question format, are we having a problem or not, is too much for many people. We have a solution for everything. That's the answer of the system. Don't. And what we do as a system, as a society, as you say, many people just reject it at first hearing without going into detail. They reject it as a principle of rejection. It's like you talk to their fear system, to their crocodile brain, that is just refusing to hear it. Like children, I don't want to hear it. But we don't have a solution. So if on an academical level, we pretend to be on that level, also as conservatories or universities, we want a solution, we would have to find a solution that works for everything. And there comes this strange guy first, of course, this guy of Switzerland, who say, yeah, but if we do this, just this little thing here, we go this far and everything falls in place. And then the world says today, we don't want to hear of it. We stick to the problem. And that's fundamentally, I would say, playing music, you do whatever you want. Beethoven is not here to complain anymore. But on an academical level, that's fundamentally wrong. An academical person, a scholar, should find solutions for problems and not reject possible solutions as a principle. Because it are not only YouTubers who freak out, and the comment section, you know, that's the thing of the online social platform that I hate. It gives people the impression that just by the possibility of typing in a comment, they are somehow a voice that you should recognize. But on an academical level, we should I think, be more honest in the fact, you know what, it doesn't work. I saw an interview of Norrington. I mean, Sir Norrington is one of the first, most important, I would say, advocates for the modern reading of the metronome to Beethoven's music, who recorded all symphonies in tempo. I'm not doing this on accident. He gave an interview for a young musician where he was laughing, like, of course, we can play it, you just do your best. I mean, what can be so obvious as playing it? And then for a local radio station in Germany, of which he probably never thought that they would put it online 10 years later, he was asked, Mr. Norrington, you claim to play all the movements in Beethoven's tempo, also the 8th symphony, last movement. And you know what he replied? He said, I cannot, can you? You know what, Norrington, it's all a joke. I mean, if you come to this point, how can I stay neutral and say, you know what, it's okay that the Norringtons and the Gardeners go out there, and like also Andras Schiff goes out on a big stage and say, if you cannot play this piece, and laughing with people who would play it slower. And so many people are influenced by their authority that they actually misuse. And then you go into detail and say, hey, Norrington, you're not playing 17 notes a second with your orchestra. Why not? Because he cannot. And of course, you come to a point that if you want to make your point, you cannot sit down and say, you know what, we're all colleagues. Let's pretend that we're all in here together, because we are not. People will try and actively try to make this message unheard. And so you have to heighten your voice. There will be a video soon about Schiff, which I respect enormously as a musician. He plays clavichord too. But he goes on stage and makes the case for the Hammerklavier sonata to be, I mean, what's wrong with this metronome number? And then he demonstrates the first few bars. Why is he saying that 138 is the right tempo, while he already recorded the piece in 104? If you are honest to your audience, you go on stage and you say, I don't know. I think it's too fast. And so it's so difficult. And I know what you're saying and I'm hearing you. It's so difficult if you care about this message, not only for the composers, but also for these young guys who are in conservatories, where I hear today they hire professional physicists to cure injuries from practicing, to free that generation from that. I mean, come on, to have joy in their music, to unchain them from that. If I want or not, this becomes a movement, and a movement needs a strong voice. And sometimes I finger point to things that are not correct. So yeah, also Norrington will come on the channel with this quote. And if he would be honest, I think he's in his 80s now, he would say, okay, I'll give you an answer. I actually didn't know what I was doing there. I didn't know this, and I didn't know the solution. And let's think about this together. But I don't see that happen very soon. So we have to defend ourselves sometimes a little bit. That's simple.
So,
I hope it makes
all
sense.
right.
I didn't want to
All right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, next part of our interview, I decided to call it 5 questions. I will ask you to name, for example, 5 reasons or 5 books or whatever. We will see now. So the first question is, why you decided to make your YouTube channel?
First was the reason of having a beautiful clavichord that I was playing a lot. And I cannot complain about the concerts that I played at the beginning years, but you know how it is. People have got you. And then, of course, I was playing so much more music that you play and it disappears. And then I thought, well, my camera can record the video. I mean, it was 2014. We think now on YouTube as a big, of course, YouTube is there, but in 2014, still early. I mean, I was a little bit too late actually, but it's still early. I said, what if I would record this and just publish it on YouTube? What would happen? I just did that for myself to build a library of content, that these recordings or these performances didn't just vanish in air. And then you start to get some comments back and some questions. And before you know it, you are building actually a community around the idea of the clavichord at the beginning. It's also not a topic without, it has some provocative elements in that as well. Well, and then this evolves to the possibility, you know, this forte piano that I have right now, I have 2 now, an original one, 1825, and a new one. I wanted to have that for so long because even when I was 16, 17 years, I wanted to play Beethoven. Was my main thing. The clavichord I bought for Bach, but went straight to Mozart and Beethoven as well. But I was thinking like, okay, knowing Lawrence Gradient actually for a longer time, if I'm going to play the Waldstein in this tempo, I will have to give an explanation. Because at best, people will say, that's a crazy guy, Glenn Gould like crazy, doing his own stuff without any theoretical background. And it's of course historically nonsense, but yeah, okay, let the guy play. And I didn't want that to happen because there was a lot of thought process that goes into this. And I decided a certain moment, 2017, when Lawrence visited our place, you know what, let's go all in on this and present this background to this theoretical background to the world. And that was actually the birth of the channel as we know it today. Yeah. So but maybe not 5 reasons, but that's the main reason. That's and today, of course, it's my voice, and I want to give it to as many people as we can. So Alberto is
yeah,
the channel.
you've got community, and of course people rely on you actually, and they're waiting. You know, one thing about your channel makes me feel very upset. Can I share with you?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, because you closed your vlog about reading. And
Reading in what sense?
remember, you had like 6 years ago, you launched a new chapter on your channel when you were talking about the books, about what musicians supposed to read. And I think, to my opinion, maybe it's good time to relaunch it again, because actually my next question, and this is addressed to my colleagues, but also to students and to young musicians. Could you please name 5 or so the most important books which every musician is supposed to know?
That's an excellent question, and it's for me very hard to answer because it depends on what your interest is. I'm reading less than I should. It's of course the nature of the thing now. Alberto is doing a lot of editing on the channel, so I'm freeing my time to write the book together with Lorenz. And my task, I mean, we don't have to go in detail. I'm not writing the theoretical chapters. I will write actually the chapters that surround his work, but that you could read as a musician. You can imagine his work is very theoretical and it's in German, like, and it will be translated in English, but so punctual. I would say, you know what, there is another entrance gate. I'm a musician too, and I'll give you my view on everything, and come on with me, and I guide you through the book. That's actually my task. So I'm reading more than I did before. What I particularly like to read is original content. If I would have one suggestion for young students or young people or any musician, is if you want to read the biography, it's fine. But it's an interpretation already. Go on IMSLP, on archive.org. We have so much material there. I mean, in the 90s, when I was studying Chopin, I had this one book, Alberto has it now, by Algeldinger, Chopin vu par ses élèves. So Chopin seen by his students. It was the only thing we had. And if I page through that book, I see in the bibliography all these things that there's exclamation mark, I want to have it, I want to have it. But today, I just type in the title and I have it. So go and read original stuff, diaries, letters, treatises. Go and read Czerny's treatise. It's great. I mean, the guy he wrote a piano treatise in 1839. And there has nothing been done afterwards because everything was in there. And if you read it today, think about it. I always see it like this. Imagine Czerny would tomorrow give a lecture on piano playing. He would basically say the same stuff as is in this book. So listen to the guy, he's speaking to us, unfiltered, which is difficult because it's another context. It's not black and white. You don't find the solutions there, but you will feel so inspired. And if you go to bed after reading that book for 3 hours, your head will be spinning. What does he mean with that? What does he mean with that? And then you read Chopin's letters. You say, oh, he's talking about the same thing as I read in Moschle's diary. Would there be something?
Yeah, it doesn't mean that it's gonna help to put these puzzles together, right?
It's that. I see it as a gigantic picture and we have little pieces of the puzzle. And every time you have one piece and you say, I figured this out. And then you take the piece and you put it on the board and you go back and say, does it make sense, this picture? What would it represent? And if the piece of the puzzle doesn't work, you take it off and you give it another interpretation and you put it back. And that's the great thing about this whole beat thing. It's so incredibly coherent. You take a piece of fingering, Czerny, Chopin fingering. I mean, if you would study with Chopin, do you really think you could stick to your own fingering? Of course not.
I don't think so. Yeah.
He would hit you, I think. So there you have the information. Does it work? Can you play those pedal indications? Does your instrument hold your back? Is it because you play on a Steinway or a modern piano? Would it be helpful to just go to a player and just experiment, I can give you the answer. The difficulties will be the same. So you figure it out until you say, oh, but now I have something. Now I can play this piece without pedal, and it works great. What did I have to do for that? Release my hand different out of the key. My legato touch is different. I cannot play legato anymore as I'm being taught to play, because I cannot use finger substitutions anymore, because Chopin didn't use it as much as we do today. Mm-hmm. So what do you have to give up? What do you get in response? And then reading this original stuff where there is nothing that will help you directly. But if you do that for a while, you will feel that you're laying a foundation of that you can rely upon, you can test for yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's so exciting. So that's the bottom line of what we do. It's so super exciting to just experiment with all the baggage from the table. Everything is new all the time again. And that's the great thing I learned from my teacher, Jacques van Nootmessen. Question yourself every day. Go sit on a chair for 10 minutes and question everything you believe in. Challenge yourself every day. Mm-hmm. That's so helpful. It also prevents you from just being too hard in your own bubble, you know? We all have that. I get telephone calls with Lawrence where you say, no, I found a new source. And then, really? You look at it, and so you challenge each other, but you challenge yourself. And the only thing you need to have is the courage to step out of the system, because it will very quickly force you to think differently and say, oh, but it doesn't work anymore. I'm going to experiment like that. And so, yeah, if you are that far, every one of your viewers, our platform is here for you.
Wonderful, thank you. Another question will be about modern musicians. Whom would you highlight and why? And second question, which recordings would you recommend to listen?
So I have to start with maybe disappoint you. I do not listen that often to music, for the reason that you have to be aware that once you're across the line, once you are practicing in this, I would say, whole beat system, but it's not that. It's just, the bottom, underneath that is an awareness of harmonic changes, of notes, of articulation, of accentuation. Once you see how this fits, it starts to make sense. There is no way back. You start, if I say I admire Andras Schiff, because I say that because he is a great musician. I would never play like him, but I would also never be able to play like him. I mean, come on, what has this guy played in his life? Who am I to even think about challenging him? That's not my point. But can I listen to his Beethoven recordings? No, never, ever again. I'm sorry, I cannot. And that sounds very hard. But if I listen to modern recordings of Beethoven, I see like these old movements playing back in the wrong speed. And my mind is like, stop. I cannot follow what you're saying. Because I've been there. I know what these notes are speaking. And they rush over this like in a rhythmical impulse. And before I know it, I'm totally lost. So I don't listen that much to modern piano players. But if I would have to pick one recording and to take with me on a desert island, let's make it a little bit more specific. Mm-hmm. That would be the last Goldberg variations by Glenn Gould, by far. Mm-hmm. I mean, Gould, who starts there, the beginning aria, the first note, only the timing from the first to the second note, he builds up an entire empyrean there. And by the way, that aria that he plays so much slower than most people play it today is exactly Czerny's tempo in whole beat. And I don't know if he experienced with that. As his Appassionata, the Scandal recording, is exactly Czerny in whole beat. As his Mozart A-dur, A major sonata beginning, exactly Czerny in whole beat. As his Alla Turca is exactly Czerny. You know, this Glenn Gould is for me a phenomenon. It's unbelievable. Even when he plays very fast, I can understand every note. And that's the thing. He doesn't play fast for playing fast or just because of tradition. He gives meaning to every note.
Mm-hmm.
And he gives always the impression to, I can double the speed if I would like to. So it's always something more. Whereas many recordings today, you have the feeling that they are hitting the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Him never. But am I listening a lot to Glenn Gould? No. I'm not. I mean, I have a huge collection in vinyl recordings, but I should make more time to listen to those recordings, because there are some interesting things also in older recordings of Bach, like the old Leipzig Cantorai, even Kittel. I have it on my channel, 1928 or something, 1940s, 1950s. Those recordings, they have still a lot of the tradition that goes way back over the 19th century. But that's a whole other topic. So
Yeah, correct. Correct. So a few sentences ago, you said that Glenn Gould was playing in slow tempo without much historical, digging into the topic. I have to defend, because we are Canadians, I have to defend him, because to my feeling and to my at least what I know about Glenn Gould, actually he was making researches, and maybe that's the case, and maybe that's why he was playing
I'm very
differently
interested
from all musicians. So I like about him that he really was not he never cared, about and that's actually what is very important for a musician and scientists to be, as I said previously, to be respectful, but to be independent.
Exactly. So if I say I cannot listen to Schiff's Beethoven, I'm not saying he plays it bad. In his view, this is a brilliant performance. I mean, come on, of course. But if you have been on the other side, you start seeing that this is like the playback speed is wrong. So, but that's hard, eh? If I want to come up to my channel, for instance, the Nocturne in B flat major, Chopin, everybody plays this exactly in whole beat, not about, eh? Exactly. If I make the point on the channel, it will be felt like, oh, you're criticizing those people. No. But we have to use the material we have. On the other side, if you as a musician make a performance or a recording, that's a statement as well. So it's sometimes hard to avoid, the provocation there. As hard as I try. But Glenn Gould, yeah, it's amazing. I give you one crazy example. When Alberto was here the first time, how people, I would be very interested in the fact to know if Glenn Gould was researching metronome marks. I maybe not. But if you are open for this reconstruction idea, then some strange things sometimes happen. For instance, again, Alberto was here the first time. And I said to him, he went, of course, to the Era, which was, it's a beautiful piano. And I said, did you play Chopin? Yeah, I played it above. Okay, we put on the preludes. And I had the Kulak metronome numbers in my hands. I said, give me your estimate tempo. And so here you had a young guy who was open for the idea. He is very flexible and understanding what needs to be understood in how to get his notation. He feels that. And he matched Kulak in 70% of the cases. Not about exact. And that's the thing what happens. It's so many times just spot on. And so I'm so confident that when you open yourself for this idea and you play a little while like that, you will very naturally come to a normal understanding again of those historical tempi. They're not gone, they're still here.
But what you just said, that for you basically this door was closed. I mean, the door to the new traditions, let's call it like that. So since you started to play more in a whole beat way, then basically it's or maybe I understood you wrong. Maybe what you're saying, that you can listen, let's say, to other Shiff and modern things playing classical composers.
Yeah.
Maybe what you meant, because yeah,
Sure.
my point and my question why let's say people are supposed to take a look and decide for themselves about the whole hobby theory, that it just bringing us more solutions and more opportunities. Especially, I mean, we're so selfish. Of course, I mean, I can handle the most of the piano repertoire, Brahms variations, and it's, yes, we've been trained. But what about music lovers who never spend 10 hours a day, as I did when I was 15, for example? Then what? Then they have to chase our tempi and being unsuccessful for the entire life, right? Or they have another option. So my point about learning and being open to these theories, that you just basically receive more options, but I disagree to deny the new tradition, because I don't want, for example, to lose opportunity to play Brahms and play Ravel and play Debussy and play Rachmaninoff, of course, in a fast speed, because I can, you know, and why not?
And that's the thing. Imagine, and we live in a world tomorrow where people would say, okay, we accept this. Let's say, yeah, what is the other solution? Beethoven, Chopin, you name it. We accept this. Then it's your decision to play differently. The only thing the world should be acknowledged to, or just accustomed to, I would say, is the fact that if you play Beethoven still in that way, you're playing it in an industrial, post-industrial way. I mean, industrial by the age. But,
yeah.
And that will be something strange to get accustomed to. But once that's done, then you have several options. For me personal, that would be something, from the moment I knew this was kind of, and I knew this from my 20th. I mean, in Amsterdam, even I had so much trouble with my piano teacher over this, that there was no other solution. I saw the connection also with organ music. It was one day when I had a piano lesson, Mozart sonata, I went to the organ class with the trio sonata of Bach, and I was suddenly realizing how this notation is the same. These guys didn't live so much apart from each other, and yet I'm playing so much different tempo. So from that moment on, I thought, well, if that's not what Mozart had in mind, then for me, personal, that's not an option anymore to even try to play differently, because I want to honor his music. And I know that was always my mantra, so to say. If you had to choose between 1 million performances and you could choose Mozart's, which one would you choose? Yeah. Probably in his mind, the music would sound the best. So, but that's for me. That shouldn't be the case for you. That doesn't have to be the case for you. It's only this idea of acceptance. Do we accept that there is actually another framework? I mean, I'm not saying that you have to play the Waldstein in 88 exactly. You can play it 92, you can play it 76. You cannot play it 136, because then you're taking it outside the scope and you're changing the idea. That I think people have to accept one day, and that will be hard. Because it's something, if you play Beethoven sonata, imagine you're practicing Beethoven tomorrow and you accept this idea 100%. It will be difficult to do it differently because it's Beethoven.
I totally understand, especially if you're actively performing. So it should be either, I mean, like on the plane, you know, either you're having fish, either chicken, you know. No one will give you both at the same time. I've tried. So well, you said you had hard times with your teachers. Would you tell us something about this, if it's not too personal? Maybe using your experience, some young musicians also will try to find a way, and will see the you know, options, how they can solve it, or how they can avoid.
Well, yeah, my experience was, of course, in a way unique, because I played organ and piano at the same time in Amsterdam Conservatory. And Jacques van Noordmes, and he died 5 years ago, I should say, almost 5 years ago. who became a good friend also, but he was one of the teachers for the early music department. I mean, he had full classes every year, so he was an authority within the conservatory. And I was, I knew that at the time, but I mean, I was one of his better students, let's say it like that. So when I started my piano lessons as a main instrument in the second year of the third year of my conservatory time, I was just doing what everybody else did. I had a great teacher who happened to study in Poland. And the strange thing is, if you studied in Poland, you are somehow by default as Chopin. You know everything about Chopin. So I was not questioning this. But then suddenly I had this Mozart Bach moment. And at the same time, we had this Temple Symposium in Amsterdam, where one of the first advocates for a kind of whole beat theory, that's Willem Retzer-Talsma, he was there after being in Spain for so long. So I had a great chance to meet him and to work with in this Temple Symposium. And for me, things fell in place because I was playing in the organ class. You cannot play on an historical organ Bach and the Tempi pianists play in because the organ has lungs. You cannot breathe that fast. So you need to, and certainly historical organs. So for me, there was no other choice than to, hey, weren't we supposed to honor the composer? And certainly I was part of the early music department. I needed to reconstruct that. But there was with one leg in the modern mainstream piano department as well, which was a kind of unique situation. And so I started to ask questions to my teacher. And yeah, of course, my piano teacher was not open for this. He started to debunk me all these things. And, you know, if you're 20 or 21 or 22, you want to change the world. And that's the thing that some teachers should acknowledge more, I think, because it's a great thing. Being challenged by your students is, and that's something I miss. I would die to have a class of students who challenge me every day. And I would challenge them too. But this was not the case here. It was fall in line, and I had to just forget about it, but I didn't. So there came this moment where I actually, having lessons was no longer an option. And he started, let's call it this long enough, he started to really do nasty things. I was also, of course, in a teaching diploma that I needed to have. So I needed to teach to students and to write something, a script. And he was holding all of that back because he was in charge of that. It was payback time. Oh. And then I remember one time I told this to Jacques Knut, and I said, listen, I have troubles in my piano class. I actually fear to go to my final examination. And I came with him in the conservatory. I still remember that as the day of yesterday. We were heading to the canteen, so to drink something, and then my piano teacher came on the same hallway. And he said literally like this with his finger point, I need to talk to you right now. And he said to me, Wim, you go to the canteen already. And after that, my problems were solved. I changed the piano teacher, and that was it. But,
yeah, so that probably was happening in about 90s or 80s, right?
In the 90s, yeah, 98,
90s, yeah,
96 yeah. Or something like that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, now I think you could solve this problem.
I was provocative, eh? I mean, don't see, I challenged my piano teacher till I wrote my scription. I went to, today we can print, but this was my scription, like, you know. And here is a chapter. This is all about teaching. It was a chapter, Chopin and the speed of the post coach. We're speaking now 1995. And I compared Czerny, Opus Pianoforte School, with Chopin's Etudes, which is unbelievable. It's like Chopin used Czerny's method, which of course he did. And I just gave the correlations there. And my deduction was, of course, based upon tempo, that we have to do something different. And I remember as the day of yesterday, that we have this jury, I had to present description and I have to defend it. And of course, the thing about the teaching thing was over. And then my piano teacher said, and now I have some questions about Chopin. He was clearly wanted to destroy me, like once and for all in front of like the most important piano teacher of the Netherlands there.
Yeah.
But I was so prepared and I won it. I just asked questions back and say, what is your answer for this and this and this? And he started to stutter. And there was one teacher, which was Willem Brons, a great pianist and more open for this, we started to laugh. And of course, he didn't like that. So I was a little bit more provocative than maybe the average student, but there was a time perhaps also, and with maybe also me. I mean, that's certainly not the right approach. But on the other hand, I come back to my point earlier. Students should challenge their teachers all the time. If you don't know it, just say that.
Yes.
It's so great when Jacques Van said to me, "Wim, I don't know this." And I remember one day when I had made a fingering of a B minor prelude and fugue, which is quite complex Bach piece for organ. And he said, "How are you doing that?" And I said, "Yeah, that's how you taught me to do that." He said, "That's brilliant. May I make a copy?" Of course, not with the cell phone, didn't exist. He wrote it down. For me, this was like my teacher.
That's actually very, yeah, it's a very unique and very rare thing, you know, when teachers are open actually to the reasonable musical suggestions, I would say. I think it's all about self-confidence. So the big names, let's say Robert Levin or Schiff or I don't know, or Sokolov or whoever. To my understanding, as I said in the beginning, it doesn't cross and doesn't conflict with their heritage. So they always can say, you know what? This music was, even Beethoven was played, I mean, the pieces by Beethoven was performed in the end of 19th century, was performed fast. So yes, I assume that Beethoven would play it slower, but anyhow, you know, our tradition, which we can, at least we can find the evidence by the audio recordings. Now on YouTube, so many things available. This recording by Brahms, you know, who's playing basically literally in tempo of UG1. I know that you're a little bit skeptic about the recording methods and speed. However, I think it's pretty much relevant. And we have many recordings of Liszt students, starting, let's say, from beginning of 20th century, which are absolutely extraordinary technically.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
The question I would use as a teacher, what do these recordings of Liszt students say about Liszt playing?
It's interesting.
Assume that it's one-on-one.
Yeah, but you really think that, let's say, I mean, I will tell you my feeling about how students rely and how they stick to their teachers' traditions. It's a really big thing, you know. You really think that, let's say, a Liszt student would just easily ignore his teacher recommendations?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying there are a lot of variables in this context reconstruction that we might just not see. Who says that Liszt was teaching this new generation of musicians in the way he was taught or he played? I can totally see a context with Liszt, who was not, as in German they say, a Schnellspieler. He was not one of those who played Beethoven fast. He was known for his slow Beethoven performances. And there are some fascinating stories. And I think, in general, the Liszt-Wagner tradition today in musicology is seen as kind of destroyers of the original Beethoven tradition, because what musicologists say today is that Liszt and Wagner later just played everything slower and had a great influence, big influence on German conducting style. I think it's totally the opposite. They were playing according to the tradition and all the others were changing, but we can go into detail if you want. But if you have seen ever this fascinating script read by this talking by Lamont on his Liszt lesson, everybody knows that, I think, where he says in the Polonaise, where you have the octaves, yop, pop, 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 pop. And at least interrupted the student and said, I'm not interested in hearing you play you can fast octaves. I want to see the Polish cavalry over the top hills. And then Lamont so clearly suggesting there that the student, we have to have an interesting context. Liszt has a student who plays Chopin way too fast. That's what he says. Okay, but those metronome marks are even faster. But anyways, gave the remark, play it slower. And then how does Lamont play? Does he play slow? No. Yet, Liszt, he made the remark that Liszt plays slower. That's actually his whole story. You will never find a pianist, a student, quoting a teacher saying, hey, you have to play faster, you idiot. It's always about you play too fast. And so imagine Liszt, such an authority. First of all, what does it mean to be a student of Liszt? Did you have 1 lesson, 2 lessons? We think that's like today, 5 years in conservatory. No, it's 3, 4 lessons. They just passed Liszt and they were student of Liszt. Not saying that it means nothing, but there you are, Liszt. And imagine that Liszt didn't play too fast in the old tradition. He was, by the way, not playing anymore in public. Are you going to teach a complete new generation in the way people played in the 1820s, knowing that you live in a time where these people have to perform like the real virtuosos?
Yeah, I understand your point.
So there are a lot of variables in this reconstruction. We cannot just say, okay, we hear Lamont play, he was a student of Liszt, so Liszt played like that, Liszt was a student of Czerny, Czerny knew Beethoven, we have it.
Yeah.
But it was so simple.
I think that's exactly the logic, actually, of the modern of the recent musicians.
And I am playing like Bach because my teacher Jacques van Noordmesse was a student of marketier. He was a student of Charles of Dupré, Widor, Lemus, Hesse, Bach. And then you go from Bach to Scheidemann to Böhm and to Sweelinck, and I'm actually playing exactly like Sweelinck in the 16th, 17th century. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I still remember, and people don't realize that, 2 things. Just go to those recordings of the 1930s. I mean, we have recordings of those people. Are we still playing like those people? By far, no. They use more rubato, they are much freer, they have a different use of pedal. Yet we claim that those people played like people 100 years ago where they didn't have recordings from. So it doesn't make sense to just say this equals that equals that. And then the bottom line is, what are you wanting to prove then? I mean, in general, we are having these discussions in the framework of the metronome problems. But you can claim that you have been a student by this, your tradition goes way back, but doesn't solve the metronomic problem. They're still there. So I don't see, I think those early performances, recordings are very valuable, certainly if it are acoustical performances. All the piano rolls I'm very skeptical about. I don't know, but I would like to know more about it. I remember recently we had the Greek recording of the, so just a digital recording of the Peer Gynt Suite #1, and there was kind of outrage, how dare you? But there was someone, and it's a pity that he didn't comment, like he had a huge collection of piano rolls, and he said, Greek made these rolls with his name, like I approve the tempo. And he said, I'm going to do some research and I'm coming back because this is nonsense. But he didn't come back. I don't know what happened. I will reach out to these people because I think that these piano rolls can be manipulated a lot. They were recorded. They were then by an engineer just improved that the wrong notes were away. And then many of those piano rolls don't have speed indications. So if we record those, or if speed indications were set later, Ravel magically plays his Pavane in 54 to the quarter note. That happens to be his metronome number 4 for the Pavane orchestration. Why doesn't he play 80 for the quarter note, which has the piano piece? How can you explain that he went from quarter note 80 to quarter note 54? You see, there are so many problems that we cannot just say, we ignore all that. Diving into the context is so complex.
That's all about, it's all because of Melzel. why did he give us a metronome? I mean, people were living fine without it. Like,
Oh
what's
no,
wrong?
that's not true. Beethoven was freaking out. I mean, Beethoven, if he met someone who went to a concert with his music, his first question was, "How are my tempos?"
Mhm.
When he published the Ninth Symphony, the Hammerklavier Sonata, he sent to his publisher, "Wait for the metronome marks, you will need them." He says in the same letter, "My Ninth Symphony was a huge success in Berlin. I think that because of the metronome numbers." So those composers, they were just so meticulously writing what they wanted, and they want to have you play that exactly in their tempi.
You know,
It's not like,
of course, that was sarcasm. I hope you understand. I mean,
yeah, but you frame something that many people think.
yeah.
Today, it's like when Beethoven would return, he would be fine with everything. No, of course not. When you enter Chopin's class, you would be hit if you say that you practice 10 hours a day. Famous outburst of Chopin to one of his students who say he played, I think, the C major etude by memory. And he said, "Listen, Mr. Chopin, I've been practicing 3 hours a day last week." And he was out. "How dare you play my music more than just a little a day? Play scales, but don't practice my music." I mean, those things should make you think about how they were thinking about their music.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh yes. Oh yes. This time is very far back in my history. You know, in my background. Now I'm closer to what Chopin recommended. I play a little bit. So I think we have to somehow jump to the conclusion, and maybe it would be great if you will make certain suggestions or recommendation from Winters to our listeners. It can be related to anything, to practicing, to listening, to general approach. Maybe you just will say, be safe, stay relaxed, and all that. Anyway, I'm just giving you time, and please approach to our listeners and wish them and recommend them what you think is important.
What I would recommend for everyone, just sit down at your piano, take a score, take your metronome, and just play. And if you do so, do one thing. Don't try to solve the problem when you are playing. Make up your mind before. If you say, "I want to just give this a chance," say to yourself, "Okay, for the next week, I'm going to play this piece." Take Czerny's Opus 299 if you want, or just take a Beethoven piece, or take a Mozart piece and the Czerny metronome. It doesn't matter. But act as if this was historically correct. In other words, imagine that this was the historical correct tempo, and you as a musician have to make it work. And see after a week where you are. And I think that's the only way of coming closer to understanding this whole problem and being relaxed about it. That's the main advice I can give, because from that point, your journey starts. And if that means that you have to, like Massimiliano, the clarinet player, he in this orchestra he still plays like in mainstream, he doesn't have a voice there to choose, but he has now this other direction. And he says in the video and the interview we have published, "I will explore both ways, but this whole beat way is for me important." And it feels like schizophrenic sometimes, I can imagine, but that's where we live in the times. You can separate those. And that would be great if many of your viewers would just do that, and in a relaxed way. We should embrace each other. And if you come to Belgium, you get a Belgian beer from me. It's always in the refrigerator. You can give Sibo a hug, and then we go to piano. We just make some fun, because that's
sounds just fabulous.
Yeah.
Wim, I would like to thank you for amazing conversation, and
having me.
there's really a lot of things to think about. And I would like to ask our listeners, whoever is watching this conversation, please don't forget to smash the subscribe button for both channels for the authentic sound. Please make sure that you watch videos which Wim is doing, because you may like or dislike, or you may have different point of view, but at least you need to acknowledge what this person is doing. He's spending his time. I can imagine what it takes to upload weekly on ongoing basis the videos, and always with quality sound, with quality content. Think about this. Just take your time, learn more about WIM's channel. You're always welcome to our channel, and stay tuned for more. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.